Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about this crazy contraption over here. So as you can probably see, what we've done is I've tried to mount my mountain bike to my motorcycle. So I know this looks a little bit ridiculous, and I think I'll be the first one to admit that it is a little bit odd, but I'm basically looking for a more fuel efficient way to get to the trailhead. Looking over here, as you can kind of see, typically I'll throw the mountain bike on the van, which doesn't get great mileage, and drive all the way to the trailhead, really just go do some biking and then come back. So I thought this might be a little bit more fun because the motorcycle here gets 70 miles a gallon, and it does a lot better for trailheads which have a really sketchy access road. You know, if you're driving the van up these bumpy roads, it's not a lot of fun, so this might be a little bit better. Also, this gives me a little bit more flexibility in situations where maybe the family needs to take the van somewhere and I need to be independent, so this gives us a couple more options. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is we'll show how I built it, test it out on the road, and basically see if this thing works. So if that sounds like fun, why don't we go ahead and I'll rewind time and we'll talk about how we put this together. All right, so here's a rough game plan. So first off, I've got myself my bike rack. So this is one of these Swagman upright bike racks. I actually did a completely separate video on these. I love these. I think I've got about 4 of them. They're really easy to use. The entire bike will mount directly on it without having to remove the front wheel. It holds the bike upright. I think I pay around, anywhere between $40 and $50 per unit. So I just actually, like I said, I've got 4 of them. I pulled one of them off the roof of one of the cars, and I'm going to now use it on the motorcycle. So the game plan is, all I really need to do is basically just take this, and ideally we'd like to sort of mount it across the rear of the motorcycle, something like that. Okay, so we'll obviously then put the bike, the mountain bike on top of it. Now, to do this, what we're going to do is let's cut ourselves a piece of 2x8. So I discovered that a 2x8 is about exactly the right thickness. So let me grab the bike rack. I'll slap it on here. And as you can see, yeah, it's about the right thickness. You can still pass the bolts to attach now the Swagman bike rack to the 2x8, and there's enough meat, I think, on that side to basically get a bolt and a nut and a washer in. So all I got to do right now is let's cut a piece of this 2x8 to approximately the length of this bike rack. All right, so we've got this cut. So now the only issue is you can kind of see this thing doesn't sit very nicely on top of the 2x8, because on the bottom you can kind of see there are, bolts sticking out. So what we're going to need to do now is mark the location of those bolts, and then I'm just going to drill out some holes partway through to allow those bolts to kind of seat inside the lumber, and therefore this whole bike rack should hopefully sit flush on top of the 2x8. All right, so I've got the whole thing set up and mounted onto the 2x8. So now what I want to do is I actually kind of want to mark the location of the center of gravity of this entire setup. So let's roll this thing around, see if I can get this thing. Yeah, that's pretty close. Yeah, see that's balanced quite nicely. Okay, so great. I'm going to mark the CG of this, so that way I'm going to know where to mount this board on the bike so that it is perfectly aligned with the bike and doesn't try to pull the motorcycle, I guess I should say, now that it's not going to try to pull the motorcycle to the left or the right. So it's right around here. So that's where we want it on the motorcycle. All right, so now that we've got the CG marked, I've got this now pretty much set up, ready to go. I also added a couple of pieces of just 2x4 blocks down here so that it will sit here and it won't shift side to side. So now I should be able to just lie this right here, which is actually right above a structural part of metal support underneath this plastic housing. This is actually where like a passenger is supposed to sit, right? So there is actually a cross beam right here, a metal cross beam that is going to sit on top. So that should be a good spot. So basically it sits right here, and now, yeah, it shouldn't shift laterally on the motorcycle. Okay, so now what we got to do is let's get a couple of maybe some eye bolts into this so that we can strap it down so it won't rotate and rock. All right, so here we are, the final configuration. Maybe we'll take a little bit closer look and I'll show you how it's all put together and attached to the bike. So obviously the Swagman bike rack is sort of the main component, and as you can see, all I did was literally just basically pass a couple of bolts through to the 2x material and bolt it in, and then simultaneously, while we're looking at the 2x material on each side, I did just basically pass an eye bolt through it, and the eye bolt is what is basically attached to this ratcheting strap that I have attached to the passenger foot pegs. So that is just pretty tight on that side, and then I have an equivalent one on the other side you can see here, which basically makes a triangle, which will stop the entire assembly from rolling about the body x-axis. Now to stop the thing from the entire assembly from kind of pitching about the body y-axis, I've got one strap here, as you can see, that I kind of tied to the back. That stops the bike, the bicycle from leaning forward or pitching forward. And then to stop the entire assembly from pitching backwards, I basically have this extension that we were talking about that I basically sit on as I'm riding along, and that is screwed into the other 2x material, which basically stops the system from pitching backwards. The only other thing that I added was on each side, I added a little bit of a 2x blocking material on each side. So now that stops the entire assembly from shifting or translating in the body y-axis. So that's pretty much the system and the setup. And I then just strap my backpack on with some bungee cords, stick the helmet up top, and yeah, this is the final configuration. All right, and we're off. I've used it for several trips, and I've gotten used to the dynamics of having the extra weight and mass behind you, and surprisingly, it's really not that bad. It feels pretty normal once you get going. I mean, it feels like you have kind of a bulky, wide passenger behind you. You do have to be a little bit careful in the sense that it is much wider than a typical load and a typical passenger, so I find myself having to ride in the middle of the lane rather than on one of the sides like I typically do on a motorcycle. But like I said, it maneuvers fine. You can see you can take corners, no problem. Starting and stopping is not an issue. And really, once you get up to speed and you get rolling, I really almost forget that I've got a giant mountain bike sitting behind me. And here I'll show you what it looks like when I get to the trailhead. You can see it actually comes off very easily. So it just takes a couple of minutes to basically unstrap everything and pull the bike off, and you're ready to hit the trail. And here's an interesting situation I wanted to show you. So we recently went to a soccer tournament for my daughter, and we piled everyone into the van and drove up to the soccer tournament. And during one of the downtimes, I wanted to see if I could zip out and do a little bit of mountain biking. Now, obviously, the family needed to be mobile and still have a car so they could get around. So what I did was just throw the motorcycle on the back of the van using my handy dandy Harbor Freight motorcycle carrier. And then when we got to the tournament, I can basically unload the motorcycle, mount our DIY custom mountain bike carrier, and then put the mountain bike on top of the motorcycle. And now suddenly I'm completely independent from the van, and the family can take the van and drive around, do what they need to, and I can head off and do some mountain biking. So I just thought I'd show you this entire process. It actually doesn't take that long to completely deploy the motorcycle, attach the bike carrier, load up the mountain bike, and be off. It takes me about 20 minutes from start to finish, so I don't think that's too bad. All right, so there you have it. It's my little homemade DIY bicycle carrier for your motorcycle. And I'm actually really surprised at how well it's performed. I've done multiple trips on it. In fact, you can see I just got back from a ride up at Galbraith Mountain, kind of near the Bellingham area in Washington State. And round trip, I probably drove about 50 miles on the motorcycle. So it's probably 25 miles out to the trailhead, another 25 miles back, and it seemed to work great. No real issues. Some things to mention though is the drag on the bike is significant. It was much more than I would have estimated initially. And what I mean by drag, I mean by that aerodynamic drag. Normally I'm able to accelerate and I can reach speeds on this bike of, you know, 50, 60, 65, even 70 miles an hour, even with a passenger on board. I can usually do that on the freeway. With this setup, with the mountain bike kind of perpendicular and kind of presenting a worst case scenario cross section, it creates significant aerodynamic drag. Especially, I think my mountain bike helmet up there is kind of an issue. So long story short, I struggle to get 50 miles an hour, maybe 55 miles an hour max top speed. So that limits this a little bit in the sense that I don't think I'd be comfortable with this on the freeway. So as such, I'm a little bit limited to taking back roads and side roads to try to get to a trailhead or get to the mountain, because yeah, the bike just doesn't have enough power to get you up to freeway speeds when you're carrying all this extra equipment in the back. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing that was kind of a challenge was the pitching about the body y-axis. Basically, this entire assembly wanting to lean backwards or forwards. That was a little bit of an issue. It took a little bit of engineering to fix that, but it seems to have worked so far. But still, you can feel when you get up to speed, the entire bike, starts leaning back. The bicycle starts getting pushed further and further back due to the aerodynamic drag. But it's nothing that's unmanageable. Surprisingly, you know, but once you're rolling down the road, this feels just like having a passenger behind you. The bike is a little bit more sluggish and you have to be a little bit more careful, but otherwise it handles reasonably well, and I'm fairly comfortable with it going along. This really is helpful in situations where you want to get to like a trailhead where the access road leading up to that trailhead is not so great. I've been on multiple hikes and trying to get to multiple different locations where driving to the parking lot or driving to the trailhead, that access road is washboardy or potholed, and it's not a lot of fun to do in a car. Especially, you know, I've got a cargo van that I usually use, and boy, that is no fun to try to get up there to go mountain biking if you have to go through a access road which has potholes the size of you know, the size of this motorcycle effectively. I've been on some of those, and it bangs the heck out of your car. It's not a good time, but with this setup, it's actually kind of fun to go through and get up there on a motorcycle, and then when you can unload your mountain bike when you're there and you're ready to go. The other thing that I find interesting about this setup is it's kind of novel in the sense that I seem to get a lot of waves and people are taking pictures of it and pointing and laughing as I'm going down the road. So I hope I hope they're laughing with me rather than at me, just due to the novelty of it. But I guess, well, you can't do anything about it. But it does look a little odd rolling down the road. But I don't have a huge issue with that. So with that being said, yeah, I'm surprised at how well this has worked. It's great. It provides another option of how to get to the trailhead or just to get out and ride your bike. So I'm very happy with it, and I think I'm going to continue using it. So with that being said, I think this is probably a great spot to leave it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, I also hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. Surprisingly, if you just scroll a little ways down and click on that subscribe button, it really does help me continue making these videos. And remember, the new videos come out every Monday, so we hope to have more mountain biking videos as well as other kind of interesting DIY projects coming up in the future. So I hope I'll be able to catch you at one of these future discussions and we can all learn something new together. So until then, I think I'll sign off. Talk to you later. Bye.